Welcome to this introductory tutorial into using Maya and creating a very simple 3D character. Okay, let's start by creating a single poly cube. Menu, poly, primitives, and we'll select cube. Creates a cube in the center of our scene at the origin. First we're going to move this cube over and form one of the legs. Now working in the positive X area, so I can see that down the bottom there, and even if I press spacebar I can see I'm in the quad view here. See it all working. Okay, so first of all we're going to move the cube over, click on the cube to select it, click on the move tool or the W key, and using the arrows we can isolate the movement to one axis. So on the X in red we'll move it over like so. Now we're going to make the cube a bit taller, and to do that we're just going to use the scale tool and click on one of the boxes. So in this case it's the Y box, which is in green, and I can scale it up like so, like there. Now I'm just going to bring the cube up so that the base is sitting on top of the grid like so, and there it is there. Now over here we can see some information, and we can see that it's on the X translate at 4. I'm just going to make it 5, so it's quite simple. And then I'm going to duplicate this leg by using the Control D. Oops. Get out of there. Control D or Command D on a Mac, and now I've duplicated the leg. So if I make that -5, it'll sit directly on the other side of the scene. So we can move them, numerically over here. Maybe that's a little bit far apart, so I might go -3 for that guy, and 3 for that guy. Whoops. 3 for that guy over there. Okay, so those two legs are done. So we can just grab those two by clicking and dragging to use the marquee select and select both the legs. And if I use the Control D or Command D key again, I can duplicate those additional legs and move them out towards the front like so. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Might just move them all back a bit, so grabbing them all and moving them back to the sort of center like so. So next stage is to create a body of our sheep. So I'll create another cube and then use the scale tool or press R for the shortcut and click in the middle, and they'll scale on all axes. Alternatively, I can scale it by stretching just one of the axes like so. And that looks looking pretty good, although it looks like a dead sheep at the moment. So let's bring the body up. So bring our sheep back to life. There we go. And he's looking very plump, and that's fine. Okay, so the body is done, and now I'm going to create the head. Again, I'm just going to duplicate. I'll move it out a little bit. I'll use the scale tool and scale it down and so forth, and then position it up the top like so. Now I'll just zoom into the top view for a second, and if I press the 4 key we can see it in wireframe, and if I click on the head you'll notice it's pretty good. I've kept everything in line, so everything's really centered, but if I need to bring the stuff back to the center and so forth. At the moment, the pivot point of the object is already in the center. So if I hold down X, that means it will snap to the grid. And if I go to the origin, I can snap to the middle, and then I can just pull it down to make sure it's perfectly in line, all symmetrical. Okay, so there's a very large sheep. I'm just going to bring him down like so. Now, look what happens when I select my whole sheep with a marquee select with all the objects. If I want to rotate this sheep around, because I've selected all the objects individually, they're all rotating around their own axes. They're not rotating around as a whole. So I'll just undo that by pressing Z key. So instead of having them as individual objects, we're going to group them together to a group node, and to do that we just marquee select all our objects. We'll bring up the outliner window, so this is the shortcut here to get the outliner in this perspective, or you can go up to window and choose outliner from here and have that floating as well. So I'm just going to embed it into the window just to save space. And now I'm going to select all the objects by holding Shift and clicking. It will select them, and now to group the objects it's Control G, and now we've grouped the objects all together. And notice where the pivot point of this group is positioned, and it's positioned at the origin. Okay, so if I was to rotate that group, again, if I go to select, I'm still selecting individual elements. If I open that up, we can see all those elements, and they're still rotating around their own pivot point. But if I select the group, I can then rotate everything together in its own pivot point, like so. Okay. So the next step is to rename all our objects up here. So I'll just start naming them. So we've got lamb, I've got the back leg, left, there we go. So the next step is to give the different materials, different objects, different materials. So to do that, we'll start with one of these legs, and we're going to right click and go hold down and go down to assign new material, or assign favorite material is the shortcut, and we'll go to Lambert, which is a matte color. So when we do that, you'll probably have this attribute editor over here come up. If it doesn't come up, you can press Control A and it will come up. And under Lambert 2, we've got that new material. So if we are to change the material, like so, we can see it changing there. And I'll just call this black, like so. And if I want to assign that same material to other objects, I can select the object, right click, and go, instead of favorite material, existing material, and there we have black. So I can do the same for all the legs. So if I select all of them at the same time, that will apply them all together, like so. So then the body, I'll give another material, so not the default material. So Lambert, and I'll call this body. And we'll make that more white instead of grey. Okay, so there's a sheep. So now we're going to set up a proper folder structure. So under File, we go to Project Window. We'll go Create New, and I'll call it LAM, and I'm going to save it to my desktop, like so, and I'll go Select. And what this will do, it will create a folder structure with all these folders inside it. So we'll go Accept. Then we have to save our scene. So we go File, Save Scene, and that will take us into that folder that we've just created and into the Scenes folder. And we'll change the file type from binary to ASCII, and we'll call it LAM. And go Save As. So now I've saved my LAM file, and you can see down here in the results that it's saved the file as LAM in the Scenes folder. Okay, so we download the file. I'll put a link down the bottom as well to the file, but the file we want to put inside our Scenes folder that we've just created. So LAM, and inside Scenes we can see our working file, our LAM file inside there. We're just going to put the polygon pet Maya file set up in there because that's got good render settings and everything set up ready to go to render from. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, Open Scene, and it'll take us directly into that Scenes folder, and we're going to open up the polygon pet file. Okay, so here's my file all ready to go. You'll notice you can't move the camera because I've locked the camera off, but if you go into Perspective, you can go change it to Panels Perspective. You can see the sort of scene set up. So it's important to bring in your pet into this scene and render from here, because we're going to be rendering from this camera, which is already set up. But more importantly, the render settings are already set up. So render settings can be found under this little clapperboard with a cog. We click on that, and it brings up our rendering settings window. And I'll just show you a couple of things that I've changed. I've changed the image format to JPEG. I've only got a single frame rendering, and I've selected the render camera. So this is called render camera, as you can see, render camera shape, render camera. I could change it to other ones, but that's the camera that we need to render from. And it's important to render from that because under environment, I've changed the color from black so that this environment actually illuminates the scene. And we've got some indirect lighting thanks to Mentorray. Now, the scale is 1024 by 1024 and 72 dpi resolution, which is all good to go. Just some other attributes in here that is worth noting would be under quality, indirect mode. Oh, actually, we need to turn that on. So that should be on Final Gather, and that will give us a little bit better quality look. Okay, so Final Gather's turned on under quality, and we're good to go. So I'll just close that. So now let's bring in our sheep or your pet. So we go File, Import, and because it's in the same project folder, it goes directly to that file. I can see LAM scenes, and under LAM I can now import that guy in there. So I'll look through my render camera, see if it's appropriate. may need to select my lamb group and scale it a little bit, perhaps. Let's make him a little bit taller. There we go. Move him around a little bit, but that looks pretty good. So to test render, we can click on this icon up the top here, and we can render out the scene. Okay, so it's finally rendered, and if I just move that guy up by tracking the object around, middle mouse button, click, Alt and drag, I can see that took 3 minutes to render that image. We can save out the image directly from this render view preview window by first going in and saying save image, and we'll look at the options, and what we're going to do is change it to save color managed image so that we get this image as it looks here. If we don't have that, it will give us the raw image file, and that will look something like this, which is a different gamma onto that. So we want to use the sRGB gamma, and we're going to save it like that. So that's that done. We can then go save image by just clicking on the save image. Don't have to click on the option over here, and it will ask us to save the image. Saved it color managed. File type down the bottom here, I'll say JPEG. There it is, and I'll call it lamb, and I might call it RO1, so revision 1, because we might do a few more things. Now what we're going to do is add a little bit more detail to this object by creating a subtle highlight on the edge. At the moment it's super sharp, this cube. There's no beveling to the cube, and what we're going to do is add a small bevel line to hopefully get some detail going across the line here. It's probably going to be a bit hard to see because it's all sort of white and so forth, but I'll show you the technique anyhow. So let's go in, grab our cube, this body, and we'll go up to edit mesh, and we'll ask to use the bevel, and straight off the bat it does a bevel of 0.5, which as you can see is way too much. So what we're going to do is change that to 0.05, see how that looks, and that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit too strong, so we'll change it maybe to 0.03. See how that looks, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to do that to all my parts. So edit mesh, bevel as well, and I might even make this a little bit smaller because it's a slightly smaller object. So 0.02, like so. And not sure if we're going to see this detail in the lower legs and so forth, but we'll give it a go anyhow. 0.00. Oops, too many. And maybe we'll do this one to 3 as well. Yep. Okay, so see how it sort of dropped. The other guys didn't get the same sort of beveling to it. So this is a good opportunity to have a look at the history nodes associated to it. So if I press Control A, I bring up the attribute editor, and under each of my objects you'll see that I've got the history associated to it. And this one already here has got polygon bevel. I can go into that. It brings back the information. We were changing the fraction to 0.03, so then we can move along and do the same thing for these guys over here and so forth. And if I want, I can go into the cube as well, but that's looking all pretty good. So that's it. So let's render it again. This time we're going to render not just directly through render preview window, but render out our image according to the render settings here, and that will save it as the JPEG. Okay, and you'll notice that it will save the file as lam, because I've saved it as lam 0.0 underscore ro1 JPEG, and it'll save it into the images folder inside the lam project path. And that's all good to go. And to do that, we go up to, we change our modeling render settings, modeling menu item, I should say, to rendering, and then under renderer, we go to batch render, which is down the bottom here, and we click batch render, and the result down here is rendering with mental ray. If we want to see the progress of this, we can click on this icon, which will then bring up a script editor, and inside the script editor it will tell us what's going on. So at the moment it's preparing to render, and when it's finished it will indicate that it's finished, and it'll save that file directly to the images folder. Okay, so now it's rendered. I can go onto my desktop where I've saved my scene inside my lam folder. Inside the images folder, I've got my lam there. So notice that our color has been manipulated, and we're back to that raw image color space. We haven't got the sRGB color space working at the moment. Now that's because if I go back to my render settings, up the top here at color management, see the output transform, apply output transform to render. That hasn't been ticked, so it's just saved out the raw image and without any color management. So to color manage this image, we need to tick that button, and then we need to batch render again. Okay, so now that's completed the second render with the sRGB color space turned on, and our end result is that. So that completes basic introduction into creating a polygon pet using cubes inside of Maya.